Hooray!
Hooray! So Alex, we have some follow-up.
Hooray! I like follow-up.
Hooray! Yes. Well, no, not hooray.
Oh, sad
No.
hooray.
Unray.
Sad hooray.
Unray.
Unray?
I don't know. So remember how we were talking about SpaceX and how they
Yes.
landed a rocket? Well, they tried to do it again.
They
And
succeeded.
the lesson is never try.
No, the lesson is they succeeded at the landing. They just failed at the standing.
Well, nah. I don't.
Yeah. They landed on the pad, and then one of the mechanical legs uncoupled and tilted
As opposed
itself
to the
back
human
up.
legs. The human legs were fine.
Right. Yeah, the human legs were fine, which is great. You know, SpaceX has a great human casualty record. They haven't killed anyone, at least publicly. And I'm pretty sure they haven't done it privately either, but, you know.
This has
who knows?
gotten really dark very, very early on in the podcast.
I don't know what's going on. Anyway, the point of the matter is it landed, except
Yes.
when it landed, one of the legs didn't quite click in how it was supposed to. I blame the mechanical engineers. And it fell over.
Yes.
And so it landed, but didn't quite stand.
So here's the thing I don't entirely understand, because they said that it landed within 2 meters of the center of the barge, the drone barge.
Yep.
Yep. If it's got this whole like lock in, grab the legs thing, doesn't it need to land 0 meters away from the center of the barge? Doesn't it need to land identically like in the slots that clamp down on the legs? Like, I don't understand how this attachment system works.
Okay, so no. The barge doesn't in any way grab onto the rocket once it lands.
Okay.
So it lands on its legs. So the legs fold down.
Right.
So the legs are folded up vertical with the rocket.
Right.
And then just before landing, they fold out and lock in place.
Right.
And when they fold farther than my hands, which the listeners can't see.
Right. I'm
can
enjoying
bend.
a view of you just flailing your arms around.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So the legs fold out and they lock in place, and then it lands on the barge, and then it just kind of hopefully stands there. I guess it's stable enough. I guess the engines are heavy enough and stuff, so it won't tip over with the rocking of the seas.
Right.
Until the human crew can get out there with their other boat, which has a crane on it, and they can like pick it up and lay it down.
Right.
So what happened was that one of the legs, when it folded out, didn't lock in place.
Oh, okay. See, my understanding of what the explanation was is that like there's some sort of attachment system by which the legs become anchored to the craft, and that one of them didn't.
No. If you watch the video, you can see the leg fold back up, basically, as the whole weight of the rocket pushes it over.
Okay.
Yeah. So it landed, it didn't stand.
That's a little weird because the legs retracted. The legs not retracted, unretracted. The legs expanded.
Deployed.
There we go. There's a word.
Deployed.
The legs deployed in advance of, before the thing even when it was still several meters above the barge. So it feels like, why didn't it just lock then?
Well, I
And
mean,
then everything would be
theoretically it was designed to, but apparently, the collet, which is used to grab on, so the collet, which uses friction.
I saw the tweet about this. There's like, oh, there was something wrong with the collet, and I was like, well, what the heck is a collet? And I went Googling and couldn't find what the collet was.
Okay, so what a collet is it uses friction. So it's a tapered tube, basically.
Okay.
And when like you push something in, it's got like a spring force, and it uses friction to lock things in place. So what happened was some ice got in the collet and expanded it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't generating enough. So when it sprung back after the ice melted, it didn't spring back enough to put enough friction on the leg.
So follow-up question then.
Yes.
What sort of crazy ice can chill out near an engine, especially near an engine that was firing as the legs were deploying and totally not evaporate?
So the problem is this rocket actually launched about 3 miles not 3 miles, 3 hours drive from where I was. It was a very foggy morning.
Right.
And rocket fuel is very cold. So before launch, you have very cold.
Oh, no.
fog.
I'm not disputing that the ice could have gotten there. It's the staying there part while next to an enormous crazy engine producing ridiculous amounts of heat.
The ice had long since melted. But here, let me send you an image of a colette.
Okay, so a collet for those who are just listening and not clicking on show notes things are drill bits. That's exactly what they are. Looking at this image, so the drill bit got some ice on it, and then didn't drill all the way down into the boat so it could stay where it was supposed to be.
That is not what it is.
This is what went wrong with SpaceX.
The best way I can describe it is that it's the part of a drill that holds the drill bit in place. So when you screw something, like it goes up it's so hard to explain this. It's like a tapered screw with a hole in it, so that as you screw the nut onto the screw, it contracts the...
And again, for those of you listening, Alex is, I just want to assure you, in case you're concerned, Alex is providing a full set of hand gestures to explain the process of how
I talked with my hands.
Exactly.
So, as you screw it on, it presses the walls of the collet down onto the drill bit, and it's what's going to lock the drill bit in place. So on the landing legs, it somehow... I don't know, because it's some sort of proprietary technology that I don't have the blueprints for, so I don't know exactly how the collet is used.
Question about that, though. How is it proprietary?
I don't know.
Because NASA, being a public organization, theoretically needs to release all of their stuff. Point. So the people that they contract out to should also be required to match.
Can we file a Freedom of Information Act for SpaceX's blueprints?
Oh, that's brilliant. Let's do it. Let's definitely do that. By the way, speaking of proprietary technologies, I was wrong. We don't pay $1.5 million per seat on the Soyuz. We pay a heck of a lot more than that.
Yeah.
When I was going back and editing, I went, oh, wow, okay.
Back to colettes, though. So colettes provide a locking force by using friction.
Okay.
Do you have a better explanation?
I don't even know what it is. I would have to. I can't come up with a metaphor to explain how something works without first knowing how the thing works to begin with. They didn't get it to stay on the boat, but it did hit the boat softly.
You could probably have put like an egg under it; it wouldn't have crashed. No, it probably would have.
But, I would be interested to know though, just how crazy expensive the boat itself is. And you said there's a second boat with a crane. Because I'm wondering if like the actual coming back and landing on land, which they've done and worked, is perhaps a cheaper option. I mean, obviously it's going to depend on what sort of orbit you're trying to get into, but I do sort of wonder what the cost savings are between those two options, because I imagine like a drone boat got to be kind of crazy expensive, right?
And they have to keep fixing it all the times because they keep blowing up rockets on top of it.
Right, exactly. They've got to keep coming up with new drone boats, and presumably it's got to try to somewhat counteract the waves.
Oh yeah, it stays in a very precise location.
Right,
it's an autonomous boat.
But not just the location. It's probably also got to try and counteract the tipping too. So it's like,
oh yeah, I'm sure
there's some gyro stabilizing craziness going on.
I'm absolutely certain that it does. I mean, the fact of the matter is, though, it versus landing in the ocean and throwing out the rocket, it saves a ton of money, right? Like,
right. No, it's certainly better than everything that we have done before.
So for options when you can't come back to land, like coming back to land is clearly the optimal scenario because you can land right next to where you took off. And simple,
but it's more fuel because you've got to reverse your lateral velocity.
Yeah, but. So it's going to spend more fuel, but...
I don't know. I would just be interested to know what the fuel savings are for the drone ship versus the expense of using a drone ship in the first place. That's my only point. Because
I would wager it's minimal.
I don't know.
Oxygen's free, so like liquid oxygen is not going to cost more or less. So it's whatever they're using as.
I don't think you can get like pressurized O2 tanks for free.
Yeah, but it's not pressurized O2. I bet they have I bet they just harvest their own. I bet they don't buy it from anyone.
Well, yes, but it's still not free, Alex.
It's liquid oxygen.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that if you've bought like the collectors and stuff, then whether you get a few tons more or less.
Well, you're really paying you're footing the bill for collecting anyway.
I don't know. I don't know how much rocket fuel costs. All I know is that it's like the cheapest part of the whole operation.
All right, enough about space. We should move on from space. Let's talk about space, Alex.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I know. So there's some sad news and perhaps some good news. The sad news is, how Alpha Centauri is really cool and nearby?
Yeah.
Well, for a long time we thought there was a planet there. We don't think there's a planet there anymore.
I say we build one.
That's a smart idea. I would be totally down for that. But this does make me now I want to find out where is the nearest place that has a planet. Because now I'm wondering if there's no planet around Alpha Centauri, and of course it could be that there is one, we just haven't detected it because of the gravitational perturbations and all of that. But if there's not one around Alpha Centauri, then maybe we've got to travel twice as far, twice as long before we go somewhere cool. And that,
I mean, I would have to think there's at least like something in orbit around a star. Yeah, maybe it's not coalesced into large bodies, but like maybe there's an asteroid field. You can set up like shop on an asteroid or something.
Do you want to set up shop on an asteroid field?
I mean, besides for the giant asteroid worms, I suppose.
Well, no, I mean, for me, more like the concern about an asteroid belt is, I mean, I guess maybe it's not necessarily a huge concern, but I would have to imagine that you've got to be a little bit nervous about collisions between asteroids. Okay, so, now, granted, they are very, very, very spaced out generally.
Yeah.
But they tend to cluster because gravity. I mean, I suppose you could find like one big isolated rock or something that's already sort of coalesced. But even then, you don't necessarily want to set up a semi-permanent colony.
Yeah, maybe. I'd say it's better than a space station. I mean, it depends on how big and dense it is, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a smaller one and you don't really get much of a gravity boost, like having gravity is probably worth it.
Yes, gravity's cool.
Like even if it's a fraction of what Earth is.
Let the record show that the Code Monkey podcast is in favor of gravity.
I think they could probably tell by the number of times
we're finally taking a contentious viewpoint here, and we're going to come out and say we're for gravity.
Except when we're not, when we'd like to like fly into space and stuff, then it's a big pain. But taking the pluses and the minuses, I suppose gravity is an okay thing.
Yes.
It can stick around.
So this has been I've been looking forward to this podcast just because I honestly think that the show notes for this podcast are probably more entertaining than the podcast itself. For those of you who, I guess all of you who don't know, besides Alex, we use workflow and we just sort of drop links in and perhaps brief commentary on, here's something related to this or here's something we could talk about with this sort of thing. And what's interesting to me is that there's no indication of who commented what. And so whenever I look at things, I go, wait, did I put that? Nope. It's just like, there's just this organic list of things that I have no memory that just sort of grows. And there's all of this commentary. And so, Alex, you've suggested that the Alpha Centauri planet that isn't there may have instead traveled to our solar system. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So recently, as in like yesterday, right. Some scientists
you shouldn't using I'm not getting this out tonight, man.
Whatever. January the 20th, 2016 is our setting. Scientists have announced that using math, they have figured out that there is probably a planet out 20 billion miles away from the sun. So they were looking at objects, like asteroids,
eraser heads, pencils,
telephones, police boxes that were just floating out in space. And looking at those objects, they were trying to figure out, well, how did those things get where they are?
Well, no, this is math. They were looking at triangles.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And circles.
Trapezoids, prime numbers.
Rhombuses.
Yeah, just floating out there. And they found a sphere that, the math suggested
an oblong spheroid. Perhaps. Sphere is a little too... We don't want to tie ourselves down too early.
Yeah, it could be spinning pretty fast. So we haven't yet observed this 9th planet yet. But the math says that in order for objects to be where they are, that they have a very, very, very high probability of being thrown in that location by a very far away planet. That is somewhat like 20 times bigger than Earth or something like that.
I think it was 5 times bigger than Earth.
I don't remember exactly the exact statistics. We could look them up. They're sitting right at the end of this link.
No.
Okay.
Nope, that's cheating, right. Alex.
Okay, so no cheating. I do remember it's about 20 billion miles away from the sun, and it's larger than the planet Earth, and it's the new Pluto. It is the new 9th planet.
Well, it's not.
This is not actually a planet and not a dwarf planet like Pluto.
Wow.
So
a lot of Pluto hatred coming off on that side of.
I don't hate Pluto. It's just not a planet. Not a planet. Whereas whatever this is a planet.
So now I'm curious. What do you think the name of this not Pluto should be?
I think Planet X has a nice ring to it, actually. Planet X.
Really?
Yeah, why not?
Well, because X is 10. It's not the 10th planet.
I know.
You call it
That's what's so
X.
great about
Let's call it Planet X.
X?
Well,
what does that stand for?
Well, so traditionally we've named these planets after Roman gods, and so I am curious now as to, because we originally had planet names for objects in the asteroid belt. I don't know if, I assume that basically once we name things, they stay that name. So presumably those ones are off the table as well. We're not going to be like, we're just going to stop calling Phobos, and we're going to use Phobos to refer to this thing.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't go too well.
Right, so I'd be interested, and I probably should have looked. I haven't managed to compile a list of what the Roman gods are that are already assigned. But I imagine we've got to be, kind of running out of cool ones.
I think they should hold a Twitter vote. And so everyone can vote via Twitter what they think the planet should be named. That's what I think should happen. Nothing could go wrong with this idea.
Absolutely nothing. This is not 4chan bait at all.
No, not at all. It'll have some great name. I don't know. Like I'd like to know a lot more about it before I try to name it. Like whether or not it's actually there. I'd like to be able to see a picture of it.
Well,
what color is it? Can we do some atmospheric analysis on it?
We had no idea what color Pluto was, and we named that thing a long time ago.
Yeah, but we have modern day technology. We can detect planets far away. Can't we wait till this 9th planet goes in front of another star?
We have modern day, but we had a completely bad representation of what Pluto looked like until literally last year.
But we're pretty sure this is a gas giant. Well, a small gas giant. Is it gas normal? It's just a normal gas. So it should have a fairly thick atmosphere that we can
So we'll analyze. Call it the planet Beano.
Whatever.
It's because it's got normal gas. It's fine.
I understand the joke. You just made me think of BMO. We could call it Planet BMO from Adventure Time. That's such a cute name.
Well, so here's my question, because we've talked about planets that we thought must be there but weren't there before. Is this possibly Sidhu Pardar, Alex?
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't think it. I think realistically it's too small. But on previous podcasts we talked about that they ran the calculations. They went, well, from the formation of the solar system, that basically there had to at one point have been a planet roughly between the size of Jupiter and Saturn that got bounced. Basically, ejected from the system. And so I was just curious, did we actually find it? Because that'd be kind of cool. We set it out. It's drifting in a very weird orbit that is very, very far away from us. Very, very, very slow. But hey, maybe we're letting it back into the party. In which case, I think Sidhu Pardar would be a very appropriate name.
It's possible that in whatever event, threw it out of the of the galaxy, of the solar system.
Out of the universe.
That would have been great.
Dropping it like a bad habit. Yes.
Got thrown out to the outer edge of the solar system. Could have been, eventful enough to rip off a ton of its mass. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was a near collision or something.
Right.
Although I'm not sure if two objects can get Oh, maybe near collision would be enough to have Saturn or something rip off a lot of the mass.
One of the reasons that they had to be very careful when they were talking about this Sidhu, this protoplanet or whatever, is that it had to be, if it was too large or came in too close of a contact with either Jupiter or Saturn, it would have totally destroyed the moons.
Oh, that's a good point.
So that's basically why they constrained it the way that they did. So I assume that for the same reason, a collision type of event would also result in those things. Though maybe the moons are the debris from that collision.
Possible.
I don't know. It's a timetable sort of thing that I have no access to.
I think the best thing to do is to like build a space-time machine and just go back in time and check it out and see what it looked like back then. Back like millions of years ago.
Why don't we start calling things space-time machines? That is way more awesome than time machine. A clock is a time machine. A space-time machine is clearly something awesome.
I don't know. I call things space-time machines all the time.
All right, brilliant. I'm going to start doing that.
Okay, excellent. I've begun my infiltration of Kevin's vocabulary. Soon, very soon, he won't even know what he's talking about himself, let alone anyone else.
And then also in the show notes, which I love the editorializing that you put into this. You said, but in the end, at least we still found aliens.
Yeah, we found aliens. I'm convinced we found aliens. So that star, I think we talked about it back when we were talking about Sidhu Pardar, actually. So we have this star that keeps dimming in weird ways, and we haven't been able to figure it out.
Yes.
So for a while, people were thinking it was comets.
Right.
But then they looked at further historical data, because people have actually been looking at this star for quite some time, it turns out. Mm-hmm. They looked at further historical data, and now they don't know what it is again. They just can't figure it out. There's like no... I haven't seen any real, like,
so your
strong
justification
theories.
for aliens is the same as your justification for the EM drive. We don't know why this is being weird, therefore, aliens.
Well, yeah, I mean...
Or, you know...
Aliens is the most plausible theory I've heard thus far now. Now that comets, which was a reasonable theory, got ruled out, it must therefore leave aliens. When you've eliminated everything, whatever remains must be the truth, right?
See, the thing is, I'm not even sure that I would buy aliens as being the simplest.
This is not Occam's razor. This is we've literally eliminated everything.
Then it is Occam's razor. Occam's razor is just the simplest explanation that meets all of the facts. You're saying you've eliminated everything else that could possibly account for these facts.
There are no... Give me some other explanation for the facts.
Bad telemetry.
Nope, not possible.
Not possible?
Not possible anymore. Nope,
Quantum bit flipping in a really, really weird but meaningful way.
Outlawed in this universe.
What?
I just outlawed it, so now it's not allowed to happen.
Strange happenings with the Higgs field.
I'll allow that.
Lensing, gravitational lensing that ends up distorting things in a non-predictable way, based on dark matter that we can't detect, that is between us and this crazy star.
I'll allow it on the condition that those strange Higgs field anomalies are caused by aliens.
All right.
All right.
I think we have a different definition of what aliens are.
So I will define aliens as
the unknown.
The unknown.
All right.
Or us from the future. It could be us from the future.
If we wanted to say the explanation for this is the unknown, then yes, I will absolutely agree with you.
Something unknown that is probably aliens.
Again, you've got the Fermi paradox thing. If they are aliens, why have we not received any messages?
Why would they be transmitting at us? I mean, if you look how fast like messages deteriorate, even if you went the 100 light years out and tried to listen to the first TV broadcast, you wouldn't be able to hear it. It would have dispersed, and it would be inaudible at this point.
It disperses, but it doesn't decay.
Let me source you on
if these are aliens that have built some sort of Dyson sphere, one would presume they've been transmitting stuff for a very, very long period of time. Would pick up something.
I mean, obviously we have nothing to go on this. We've not had contact with other aliens to try to figure out what communications from old alien civilizations look like. Also,
a civilization capable of building a Dyson sphere around a star hasn't figured out interstellar travel?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't believe that interstellar is even possible.
But you are very much not one of them. We've established this over the course of many podcasts.
I
So, Alex,
am a
does
huge
this
fan
mean? Does this mean that
of speed of light travel
Does this mean that
of speed of light travel?
if you believe in aliens, I think what you're also saying is that we don't have the ability to contact them, and that we will never achieve interstellar travel.
I will say at the moment we don't have things to contact them with, because anything that we have just is bound by the speed of light. We don't use faster than light communication methods in day to day. We can't talk to them, and so perhaps if they've invented some way of being able to talk to themselves at faster than light, ways, some sort of sub-ether communication or whatever science fiction universe you want to use. We can't hear it because we don't have the receivers for it. So perhaps they found that first. Maybe there is some sort of...
But they haven't visited.
Why would they visit us? Why?
Why wouldn't they visit us? Are they not curious about whether or not there's life in the universe?
Maybe they have sort of a prime directive. They're not allowed to.
Okay, so here's the thing about the prime directive. I was hoping you'd bring this up because my brain already went to that. So here's something I don't understand about the prime directive, and this isn't an ethical argument about it or anything. It's merely so the idea in Star Trek with the prime directive is that you're only allowed to chat with people once they discover warp power. So once they get FTL, then they're fair game. Now, here's the thing I don't understand, though, and we'll pass over the whole, everybody always ignores the prime directive because it makes for good TV thing.
Okay.
But here's what I don't understand. So, you're a civilization that hasn't discovered FTL, and for whatever reason, it's a big blocker. It's just really tough for your scientists to crack. Mm-hmm. But you're flying around using slower than light travel, perhaps even to other nearby stars, using hibernation stuff, which is also established in the Star Trek universe. And yet all of the Federation is going around chilling in systems, orbiting around planets, just sort of assuming it's fine. There's not going to be an ISS that's going to go, what's that big thing over there? Presumably the prime directive would mean not just don't go down to the planet or be incognito if you're in the planet. It would mean don't be anywhere near that system because they might notice you and go, oh my gosh, something is possible.
I think there was an episode of The Next Generation where they mentioned something like that, staying away from the systems that have uncontacted life on them, and they definitely would try to cloak themselves. They didn't have the real cloaking technology like the Romulans had, of course,
right?
Until they stole it.
They didn't steal it. It was an agreement.
Yeah, okay, whatever. It was an agreement for the Defiant, but I swear they stole it on The Next Generation, didn't they?
Oh, maybe.
And they stole it on the original series. On the original series, Kirk stole Romulan cloaking technology. That's what it was. Anyway, the point of the matter is, I think they did try to stay as far away from them as possible, at least out of their system, if they were a spacefaring, society on the verge of perhaps finding warp travel. And if they showed up at their system, I'm sure that would be fine to oh, you're here now? Well, I guess we can tell you about this whole galactic civilization.
Well, no, here's the second part, though. All of their planetary scans they have to do from orbit. They're always scanning for life signs and everything from orbit. So how do they even determine that some planet is habited or not habited, or spacefaring or not spacefaring?
Are you certain they had to be in orbit?
They always do.
For everything they did? They had the long-range scanners.
The long-range scanners picked up warp signatures. They didn't pick up life signs. They always had to... There was a whole thing. They always had to warp nearby and then drop down and then scan stuff.
I don't know. Maybe.
So I'm just saying, I don't think the Prime Directive is practical.
I kind of agree with you. I'm not certain that if there was some sort of big galactic civilization that we would try to enact such a rule. Maybe, but I doubt it.
We started to have a discussion at the end of recording the last podcast that didn't make it into the podcast because little known fact, Alex, we're really boring.
Yeah.
Toward the end of our podcast, usually we start to slow down. We're low on energy, and it's okay. Well, we had this thing that was just kind of a brief discussion. I was like, this isn't quite going to make it in, but I want to talk about it now because I've been thinking about this all week.
All right, and you've been thinking about this for a lot longer than a week.
Yes, but I've been thinking about it particularly this week. So,
okay, let's do this.
Let's talk about I have a dream, Alex. I feel like
You do.
I feel like I say this way too much on this podcast.
I mean, we all have dreams. I just phrase them as reality.
I have a dream, Alex.
Good. What is it, Kevin?
So, I want there to be a final, ultimate game.
Like, no one's ever going to make a game after this one. They'll play it and be like, well, we're done here.
Yes.
Wipe their hands and just the whole games industry collapses.
Well, so this is partially. I started thinking about this kind of seriously after I read Ready Player One, maybe 3 years ago. But it's always been kind of a fascination with me for since I was in high school of this idea of having kind of persistent virtual worlds. Mm-hmm. Obviously, some of the first attempts at things like this are things like Second Life did not pan out so great.
I mean, they made a lot of money for the people who made them.
They did. And obviously, this all traces back to earlier things like, Furcadia, I think was the first graphical multiplayer user space.
Yeah.
And then there were MUDs, which I don't remember what those stand for, but they were kind of text-based, multi-user text-based adventure type of games.
I don't even remember that.
I don't even remember that. That was kind of really before, well, not before my time, but I was not interneting at that time.
Yeah.
So in Ready Player One, there is this kind of premise of this virtual world that is so engaging and awesome that everyone just kind of lives their lives in there.
Yep. And society has collapsed around them.
Well, and yes, that's part of the problem that comes along with that, is that it doesn't work out too well. But I found this idea of the Metaverse, which I think is originally kind of proposed in Snow Crash, book that I've never been able to finish because I don't know. I don't know why.
I haven't read it either, so
it's I struggle with it. But
is there an audiobook?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to take a look now. So I want a virtual world, Alex, in which every other game can exist.
Okay.
So I would I have a dream that I can be playing Euro Truck Simulator, get out of my truck, and get into my KSP rocket, and then fly to Jeddah and execute a whole bunch of trades in New Eden.
I don't know what Jeddah is, but okay, I'm on board.
It's EVE Online. And then I can go ahead and land on a planet and fight orcs who are invading Azeroth and do all of these things. I want to be able to do all of these things in a shared, unified space.
That shared unified space that is incorporated in virtual reality, so like you have a headset on, or do you want to like have it be like one game? Or what do you want? Where does your dream end?
So the thing is that I don't like. I think that this is ultimately the way of the future, and I'm not. And it's not just a game thing. Like I think that theoretically you could use this for socializing and commerce and all sorts of other applications. But the games could be kind of particular environments within this shared virtual space. Not necessarily saying that it has to be virtual reality based. It could be that it is keyboard and monitor based. It could be that it is whatever. It could be that certain portions of this universe are only accessible if you have the right equipment to do that.
Okay. So like you could only play Euro Truck Simulator if you had a steering wheel type thing, or maybe you have a VR thing with haptic gloves or whatever, or maybe they're an environment they're like totally cool. They're like, yeah, just control it with your keyboard, man. It's fine. But what I want, though, they need to have a shared identity system and a shared resource system. Yep.
One
login to rule them all.
Right. So this is the thing that I find the most fascinating and particularly challenging. And if I just got like grant money, which is apparently a thing that used to happen like in the 60s.
You would just get it. You'd be sitting at home one day, and like the government would pull up in a truck and just say, "Here's some money."
Yeah, go think about stuff. Like, oh, perfect. If I ever got grant money, this is the problem that I would devote my life to trying to solve. Because I find this.
You go and get your PhD.
And I guess to make it more clear, like let's imagine that it is just a VR environment, right? Like,
okay.
It doesn't have to be. I think the actual technology for how you access this world, this metaverse, doesn't particularly matter, and is subject to change and subject to iteration and all of that stuff. what I'm particularly interested in is figuring out an architecture by which multiple games and multiple environments and multiple systems can interact. And
how do you want to do that, Kevin?
there are two kind of big problems in my mind. One is that I think it very much needs to be structured like the internet, in that it needs to be distributed, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you have VR and Facebook runs the servers that run that VR world, and everybody starts to build their lives and their whole gaming experiences and everything within that particular world, then Facebook can decide to be evil at some point.
Yeah, you might argue that I already have.
Right.
But they might suddenly decide
microtransactions.
You can just pay to be friends with like anyone you want. Like, hey, I'd love to be good pals with Bill Gates. Here's $100,000. Now we're best friends.
Right.
At least according to Facebook.
Right. So one of the things that's really wonderful about the internet as a whole, and you kind of argued this point strongly last time we talked, is that you have the ability to go, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. And if I don't like how something works, I'm going to go and make my own website and make it cooler.
Right.
And that's a wonderful thing about the internet. And there's also additional benefits, like if a server goes down that happens to be hosting a lot of traffic, well, that's fine. We'll just route around it. There's no single point of failure for the internet.
Right. That's fantastic.
Presumably for China, there are several key places that could die, and then you'd have a whole country that doesn't have internet.
Yeah.
And even for us, like if our local ISP dies, we can end up in trouble, but we can always walk a few blocks to somewhere else, or a few miles, or whatever the coverage range is. But the internet itself exists independently of any single entity.
Yeah, that last mile from wherever your central office is to your house can be a single point of failure for the network. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, for a lot of people, it isn't, though. I know if my internet goes down, I plug in my cell phone. Hey, my network's back up. I'm routing over the cellular network.
Yep.
So increasingly admittedly in
or
richer
you just poach off of someone else's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, if they're using a different ISP or even the same ISP, and if it really is just that last mile dedicated link, like your cable modem goes out, then certainly you can just hop on someone who has poor security or a very nice guest network or something like that.
Right.
The adaptability and the resilience of the internet is like super amazing, and I think it's my favorite part. Like routers and stuff. I went and got a degree in computer networks because I found like routers and the way they work to be this like really fascinating thing. I really like how resilient like getting from one IP to another IP is. Like what happens at those endpoints at those IPs, I think is up to whoever owns that IP. And not like intellectual property, I mean IP address, internet protocol address.
Right.
As long as we can maintain that like all routers treat all packets equally and all IPs are addressable, then we're in pretty good shape, right?
Right.
Because then anyone can do what anyone wants.
And then, so I think this is kind of the first issue is that, and I shouldn't necessarily say issue, but this is kind of one of the things that I think is a problem with existing approaches to massively multiplayer online environments. Is that for practical reasons, like not out of any sort of malice or need to control, but the result is that everything exists on Activision Blizzard servers or CCP Games servers or whoever happens to be hosting whatever. If you're playing a multiplayer game, which means that there is very much a single point of failure and a single point of control and a single point of resolution.
But these are companies that have paid to build all of it. It's all theirs. They bought all of it. And
so they
own all the IP.
And this is not, so this is not to denigrate that at all. But I think the big challenge is that if you want to try and build, because I really want this to be, I want to call it like Endgame. Because I want this to be the last game. Like this is the last thing we ever have to build, and everything else can be within this structure. If we do something,
last framework.
No, it's Endgame because it's a game and it's really cool.
Okay, Endgame.
Right.
All right.
So the problem with with it, though, is that if we do depend on a centralized server, then basically we're running into the same issues we just talked about with the internet. That you have one particular entity which could fail, or could decide to be evil, or it's obviously going to be a big target for hacking. And then everybody ends, when you have that sort of centralization of control, then it means that everyone else is not going to be entirely willing to depend on that.
It seems like the solution is to have a distributed web server. So that way everyone can have free web serving, web hosting that's provided by everyone else who's connected to the internet.
Right.
So anyone on the internet holds the whole internet.
So the problem with centralized, with a completely decentralized system is, let's imagine that you and I are playing a first-person shooter, right? We're playing Call of Duty in a virtual world. It's really cool. We're basically playing paintball.
I just have one question.
Okay.
If you die in that game, do you die in real life?
No.
Oh, then it's kind of boring then.
No, it's not. We can worry about that. That's a detail.
Okay. All right. We're playing a boring game.
No, this is the end game. Like, you don't want, like, if the first time you die, like, everyone dies in the noob area, and then they're like, all right, well, that was cool. Guess I'll be done with that and go back to boring tax preparation or whatever.
Taxes? I love doing my taxes.
All right, well, then maybe you can have permadeath enabled. No, right. So imagine that we're basically playing paintball, but then in this virtual world, and we're the only people that happen to be in this particular area of the map.
Okay.
And I say, I got you, and you say, no, you didn't.
Well, I'm obviously always right. So
well, see, that's one approach.
You didn't get me.
Well, so in addition, you also have the issue of, when you're dealing with virtual worlds, you have a lot of things that are permanent or persisted in that environment, or you have artificial intelligence, you have, NPCs, non-playable characters, that whole thing. That's very, very expensive to run. We can't say that everyone who uses the system has to own a supercomputer so that they can...
Well, we could.
So they can maintain their version of the entire virtual world in all of the spaces. That there's only a particular, portion of the world that you care about at a particular point in time, and that it's not your job to, to manage all of the AI and stuff. So that's one of the reasons that you have things that Blizzard has their own services, to actually manage that. If I kill an NPC, then the other person comes up and they may not have been anywhere near around, but they show up and they're like, oh, look, that NPC is dead. Or you play EVE Online and it deals with the contention of who shot who and that whole thing.
Yep.
So you can't have really a completely decentralized network in this sort of environment.
Yeah.
Which means that I think the right approach is to say that, basically kind of like the web works in practice, and that you could say you can own a particular portion of the world and you are the decider for that environment. So I can say I'm going to build up my own portion of the world, and I'm going to deal with who's allowed in, how they can interact. I can arbitrate when they say who shot who. I can say, here are the resources that you can get from this world, and that whole thing.
Okay, so I guess my question is then, if you're allowing people to take ownership of parts of this, universe of the Endgame, then how is that different than, say, like Blizzard saying, all right, we have all these servers, we're now going to take ownership of this IP address and have it do all the things relative to this game? Because isn't that still a single point of failure?
It is, except that basically if you get ejected from that world, you can just go to a different world in this virtual universe.
So you're saying you'd allow anyone to host the platform. So it'd be like letting anyone host a World of Warcraft server then?
Yes, basically, except it wouldn't, you don't, obviously it doesn't have to be just World of Warcraft. You can have,
right.
I'm hosting, I could say I'm going to host World of Warcraft, you're going to host Kerbal Space Program, someone else is going to host Euro Truck Simulator, or, whatever, or some, obviously not any of those things, stuff that we come up with ourselves that are really cool, may have completely different styles of gameplay, different styles of resources, some may be PvP, some may be not, and that basically would have to have some sort of system by which I can say, in the same way that the web has hyperlinks, that I could say, hey, if you drive to this spot, that's going to transport you over to Alex's world.
Yeah, but okay, so I still don't think you've sold me on how this is different. So we're all running this basically like this Endgame platform,
Right?
And on top of that platform, companies will build and publicly like make available their worlds, so
Right.
to speak. So like Call of Duty, or I think it's Activision or EA or whatever, will put out the Call of Duty world that you can then download and put into your space in the universe, right?
No. So you're still dealing with the user is really just a dumb client. I mean, I don't exactly know what the protocol would end up looking like. You're not necessarily downloading a game and then playing it. We'd eventually figure out some sort of shared description, so we could say, the basically you just connect to my universe, much in the same way that we connect to a web page. There's some shared specification that I may have a web page that's Flash based or that's using a whole bunch of JavaScript. You may have a web page that's just plain HTML. You may have whatever, and we might also have pop-ups that's like, hey, you can't visit my universe because you have ad block on. We go, okay, well, I'll just go to a different universe then.
This still just sounds remarkably like the web, except instead of using HTML, you're using Endgame MTL.
Yes.
So how is yours better?
Well, okay, first off, it's a virtual world, and that's really cool in and of itself. I
agree.
I agree. All of the current approaches to VR are proprietary specs for proprietary devices. The idea here is that we would have some sort of shared specification for this is how you interact with a virtual environment. And that virtual environment could literally just be, I've got in a VR headset and I'm going to sit down in this virtual chair and type on a virtual keyboard now, because this is a platform jumper game that I can only play, like the DOS emulator world or whatever it may be. That it could be literally whatever, but the idea is to have a shared specification. The one thing that the internet does not do, and I think this is becoming more and more apparent with the way that the internet is going, is that the internet does not try and correct for natural monopolies.
What do you mean by that?
When the internet began, we had just everybody put up a web page on their own computer, and then nobody could find it. Then we moved on to things like Yahoo, which were basically just bookmark sites, where the owners of Yahoo were like, "Hey, these links are all about Star Wars." We go, "Oh, good, now I can find those. That's cool." And then we eventually moved on to search engines and things like that. And now we're moving into this approach where the majority of the way that we interact with the web is either through the Google search engine or through our social media feeds.
So you mean that right now a small number of companies have all the control of what people see,
right? And
Google
not
controls,
and not because of the nature of the internet, not because of anything that falls out of that, but it's just a matter of we have gravitated toward this particular system. Yep. And my concern with the virtual world is that even if we figure out some sort of open specification so that we can all interact with this, I would like this to exist in a way that actually corrects for natural monopolies. Because it's very hard to start up your own Facebook competitor right now. Because the value of that is based on how many other people are using your service.
Yeah,
it's based on the amount of content that you can put in. Facebook has if Facebook had to get rid of Facebook right now and start up a new service, they'd be able to do it really well because they have an awful lot of resources that are already optimized for producing a social media platform. And the whole idea is if you want this to be something that's perpetual, you ideally want it to correct for natural monopolies.
Okay, so how do you prevent a handful of companies from holding all the power?
Even the internet, as open as it is, I'd argue that it naturally we naturally gravitate toward this sort of power imbalance.
I mean, I can see that because, like, say you could broadcast something to every single user of the internet at once. Like, hey, come use my site. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to spend an exorbitant amount of money to set up servers to be able to handle the 5 billion people who suddenly visit your site all at once. And that's even assuming you could do that ridiculous thing of just telling everyone on the internet to use it at once.
Right.
And people are, reluctant to change, right? Like, hey, they have all their friends on Twitter and they like Twitter, they know how to use Twitter or Facebook or Reddit or what have you. So why would they change to a new platform?
Right. And so I'd argue if you got rid of so if Twitter and Facebook and Amazon and Google and everybody disappeared tomorrow, I'd still argue that 10 years from now would find ourselves in the exact same position. It wouldn't be the same company, wouldn't be the same people, but would eventually have this point where there are a very small number of sites that control a disproportionate amount of our lives, and it becomes very, very difficult for anyone else to say, I've got a really cool idea for a new, virtual world. I'm going to put it up there and try and make it work.
No, I certainly agree. But A, I don't really know how you're going to correct for that, because B, I think it's a human problem more than a technology problem, right? Mm-hmm. I think the platform is open enough that this is what happens. Like Walmart exists, right? Why does Walmart exist? Walmart doesn't really have anything to do with the internet, but Walmart is this global like superpower because people like its consistency. Again, with like McDonald's, like people know McDonald's. Hey, why go to somewhere different? When you're traveling, you'll just go quickly through McDonald's because you know what it is. It happens in reality too, that we get these monopolies that have like huge amounts of power. So I think it's more of a problem with humanity than it is with technology. So are you suggesting something to compensate for humanity?
Basically. So
okay, I'm excited.
I would also argue that and certainly teenagers are probably going to agree with me on this. Facebook is not particularly cool because everybody's on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? And I think
I barely use it.
The extent, well, yeah, and I think a lot of people they have accounts, but I think that there's certainly a value to certain networks based on, everybody's using it, so I know that if I go on here, I can get in touch with anybody. But I think as far as if I look at my own interaction with the internet, I found that things like Facebook are less fun because, or even things like Twitter or, Tumblr or whatever, or even YouTube to some extent, are less fun because when you're looking at this huge mass of people, it's very difficult to develop personal connections. So one of the things that I really like about Reddit is that it rigidly segments. Is that if I go to the Reddit front page, things are just as bad. But I can go, I'm going to go hang out with the people who care about the EM drive, or the people who, or kind of whatever, that I can go in. And if you look at, small communities or the Kerbal Operating System subreddit is another one, right? I've got people that I know from there now, and like, it's really cool. And this is actually something that I find a lot of value in. I think that when we have these big natural monopolies, we end up, it naturally happens, but it ends up not providing what we ultimately want, which is a way to interact with the maybe 100 people that we can keep track of at any point in time.
So you want a distributed Reddit that runs in VR?
No. This is just kind of the case for why these big centralized things are bad. I don't think I agree that it comes from human nature, but I don't think it benefits humans. I don't think the result is beneficial.
No, I agree. I'm just saying I don't think it's at this point a fault of the platform. It's just a fault.
Oh no.
of humanity.
Yeah, there's no judgment going on. It's not that these evil people have architected some way to take control of the internet or anything like that. It's that we've out of convenience we've kind of handed this off. And I think the way that you correct for this, and I still don't entirely know how best to do this, but I think that the way that you try and correct for this is by having a shared resource system that is independent of the environments themselves.
So you mean like fuel or money, or what do you mean by resource?
Well, that's the thing, is that it would obviously have to vary based on what environment you're in. If you're playing Euro Truck Simulator, having space credits is not going to be particularly useful to you, right?
Right.
You'd have to have some sort of shared way of, that basically, and this is also kind of tied with identity, that when you move from universe to universe, you have a personal inventory, you have some sort of currency, and then it is up to the universe host, the server, the owner of that universe, to determine how the players can interact and how that currency works.
Okay.
And then the way that you try and mitigate this kind of clustering issue, this natural monopoly problem with the internet, is by somehow tuning things such that the amount of resources that can be exported is greater for the smaller communities.
So every planet, every universe, every instance of the Endgame has a finite number of resources, and so if you have a small community, then they get a greater share of the resources?
Yeah, so I mean, imagine if you will, you've played Minecraft, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So imagine that basically you've just got a whole bunch of multiplayer Minecraft maps that have, portals where you can jump between them. If one of them becomes really, really popular, it's going to end up producing fewer diamonds.
Yeah.
And then naturally people aren't going to want to spend as much time there. The idea is that you have to find some sort of way to to kind of counteract the clustering, the popularity of these particular servers. And it also mean that basically you can, as from the benefit of the Facebooks of this virtual world, is that I'm only ever going to have this amount of market share. I don't need to have a billion servers in case everybody logs on at once. You know that these things are going to be somewhat self-regulating.
Yeah, because as they get too big, then the number of resources to distribute goes down. So I guess the question is, what keeps people from spinning up 100 million instances, grabbing resources on their one inhabitant system, and then pooling them, and then running away, and doing whatever people do with this virtual currency that would make it valuable? Because now you have to make this virtual currency valuable enough that people will restrict where they access to get more of it.
Right. Well, so as far as actually dealing with managing the currency itself, I'm going to say a dirty word, and it's Bitcoin, because it's a terrible, it's like the worst possible, it's just awful. Bitcoin did not do well.
Huge problems. I mean, they're still a thing. They're still worth like $400 or $500.
Right.
I don't really know why.
But the concept behind them is really fascinating and reasonable.
Yeah.
And the idea is that this is the fundamentals of the blockchain, which is kind of the big idea behind Bitcoin, is that it is a way for you to trust people, or it's a way for you to interact with people without having to presume trust.
So you want to have your currency backed by Bitcoin, but
not necessarily? Well, probably
Bitcoin,
a good version of Bitcoin.
Yeah,
but I think you can also use this to manage identities.
Yeah,
and by the same extension, virtual world registration.
Yeah, because
basically, if I've set up a Facebook, then I can go ahead and try and submit something and say I'm gonna spin up a universe called Facebook 2 so that I can deliver twice the traffic. And then the whole rest of the community would say no. And that basically, because this is just a matter of verifying kind of this limited number of things, this is something that everyone could contribute to. This is not something that has to be a matter of the server hosts only. This is something that the players could also participate in this blockchain to kind of evaluate the legitimacy of all of these items.
And to receive the in-game currency, whatever that may be.
Right.
Through mining. Because that's the incentive that keeps Bitcoin working.
Well, the idea is right. So Bitcoin mining, is kind of the how currency enters the system. Though you wouldn't necessarily want players to get kind of free money, because you want them to interact with the world. That basically their remuneration, their payment for getting for participating in the system is being able to interact with the virtual worlds. The virtual worlds themselves would be the recipients of any money.
And that money would then be distributed to the players?
Well, the money becomes the resource on which the particular game is structured.
Okay.
So basically, if I'm running a Euro Truck Simulator, Minecraft is honestly probably the best example here, or the easiest analogy. I'm running, my Minecraft world, and based on the user frequency and some sort of a shared agreed formula, I end up generating diamonds that then could be mined by players, and they could take them off of my Minecraft world and use them elsewhere.
So you keep people from spinning up so many instances because these are now computationally intensive instances because they have to be doing the process of mining and sustaining the currency? Or?
No, it's that actually the domain registration in internet terms is also verified by the blockchain and is tied to the owner identity.
Anyone can only just have one. Any owner identity is only allowed to have one world. Then
possibly, it could be that it's. I obviously I don't know. I haven't built this. But you could theoretically say, I'm going to have 4 worlds that are completely different, but they're going to share share the same resource bucket.
Okay.
Or something like that. But the idea is that you use that whole system of everybody has to verify and approve, or at least the majority has to verify and approve in order to get new systems spun up. So that basically you don't have people that are domain squatting or are buying as a whole bunch of different addresses. And also, it is also somewhat self-regulating because the way that you interact with this virtual world, ideally, is through consensus and through referrals from other worlds. So if you create a world and nobody's willing to share, to create a portal in their world to get to yours, well, that's rough for you. I mean, I suppose you could also set it up to be some sort of just diminishing return type of thing, such that if you want to have a world that everybody hangs out in, that's great, but the resource increase is going to be minimal. So if you have 0 people in your world, you get, if we're imagining Minecraft again, nobody visits your world, you don't generate any diamonds. 1 person visits your world, you generate 5 diamonds. 1 million people visit your world, you generate 10,000 diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
So something like that.
I mean, you'd have to set perhaps some different cutoffs, but you could tune all those in, right? But how do you make this money valuable? Is there be like a market you can like spend real money and get this in-game currency, because that way it would incentivize people to get the in-game currency because they could then sell it and get real money? Like, can you buy things on Amazon with this? Can Amazon spin up like a virtual storefront that you buy with your in-game currency? Like, why would people care enough that they would migrate to smaller groups?
Well, this is, I think, the harder thing, and it's a matter of figuring out how to. If everybody is good, if every universe owner is awesome, then basically this becomes the currency system or the energy system of your game, right? So, if I want to go into the World of Warcraft world, hey, look, I've got a whole bunch of gold because I spent a whole bunch of time mining diamonds in Minecraft, and so the value is in the actual gameplay.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I guess theoretically it would eventually, probably have some sort of conversion with actual real world quality. Maybe you end up paying your Netflix subscription because you're visiting the Netflix world, and that just comes out of your your player resources.
How does that keep the real game servers on? So they get the virtual currency, and then they can sell the virtual currency on the stock market virtual world? Yeah,
basically,
the E-Trade virtual world? All right. So I guess that opens up an interesting hole where... So imagine you had a world like you had the Facebook world.
Mm-hmm.
And right now Facebook doesn't get paid money except by advertisers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens... What's to keep Facebook from buying a whole bunch of currency, far more than they would generate, by using their ad revenue to pump back into the well, I guess that increases server costs.
Right.
So paying out more, even though they have more people, because they've bought currency using money that they gained from it's like blanketing their people with advertisements, right? I guess what's to stop them from doing that? I guess it would annoy the people because they'd be one of the few worlds that had. They could make the same amount of money or about the same amount of money going to a place that didn't have advertisements.
Well, and the idea is that that it eventually becomes not sustainable, right?
I suppose as it continues to grow.
I mean, theoretically, you could tune some sort of export tax so that basically there's a gold sink whenever any resources are transferred between worlds. Mm-hmm. I mean, if that became a viable strategy, that's what you'd have to do. So, Facebook is basically, going and bringing a whole bunch of gold in so that they can basically give it away if people come to their site.
Okay.
Then
but who's
those people take the gold, they take it away. Facebook goes and it gets the gold back and brings it to their site so that people come back to their site. Well, eventually, if you add a tax system, and eventually that's going to become zero. So they would have to continue to keep...
Where do those taxes go? Where do those taxes go?
Well, with a blockchain, you can program in deflation and that sort of thing. Basically, you could throw in just an artificial transaction tax.
Right, so they just go away. That money goes away? Okay.
Yeah, that's the great thing about virtual currency is that you can... Right, if you set up a shared rule set and then you make sure that everybody's running the same version of the rule set, or at least the majority, then you can program in just, money will appear under these conditions or money will disappear under those conditions, and otherwise don't verify this transaction.
And who's the arbiter of this rule set?
Well, that's why you have the blockchain.
But like you said, if Facebook starts abusing it, you implemented export tax. Well, who implements the export?
No, sorry, I shouldn't say if this happens. Then it's more of if we discover that this is a legitimate loophole, then we would program that in from the outset. This would be part of the initial design for a distributed.
Okay, but it's not updatable, so it's set in stone, is what you're saying.
That's a tricky part, is the figuring out, whether and how potential changes to the system could happen.
I mean, you could set up some sort of like GitHub with voting for pull requests.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could set up some sort of also, that basically as soon as you get a majority rules thing, then things update. The idea is that really to make this work, you do have to have some sort of not personal identifying information, but unique identifying information, so that I can't have two accounts on this system, because otherwise it's very much open to rigging.
But I'm just like, how does the system update? How does the system compensate for that? Like, it sounds like you've replaced all the little majorities with one big, all-powerful majority that everything else is built on top of.
Right.
And how do you now regulate this all-powerful empire?
Well, I mean, it's hard.
I agree.
But I think you're looking at the way that, if you look at all of the laws that haven't been able to get repealed, like Congress is very, very good at making laws. They're very, very bad at getting rid of laws. A system that is very hard to change isn't necessarily a terrible idea.
No,
that basically, obviously, if there's some hugely critical thing that everyone's like, we need to fix this, then you would get that, kind of majority from every user of the system. And those changes to the policy could be passed. And presumably you'd want to, like, we figure out a cooler way to do VR that necessitates a change to the protocol by which users interact with the servers. And that needs to be, since that has to be consistent for everybody and to interact with all the worlds, that would also have to be the sort of thing that goes through some sort of approval process as well.
But someone has to count the votes, right? Who counts the votes? Who decides when that change is made, right? There's got to be a single point that counts them, right? How do you distribute the counting of votes?
Not with a blockchain-style approach, though.
Oh, because the blockchain, every user of that. Okay,
so so with every user the system uses they're all
has to update.
Yeah, so basically, as soon as they go, wow, there's a majority, I'm going to update. Those who don't update may just find they can't access the system. And you could also say that, because so-and-so owns this particular, virtual subworld, that, oh, look, you can't connect because you're using the system that was rejected.
So this would all be open source, and anyone could just publish their own version, and if the majority decide to take to it, then it's all good?
Yep.
Okay.
But
I can see that working.
It's going to be it'd be very, very hard for something to get a majority vote, so that'd happen very infrequently. Maybe that's an issue, but I honestly think it's probably not so much of an issue.
Well, I think the biggest issue with that is that you'd start splitting the user base. So, like, the blockchain would split and wind up with two valid versions, right? Like, people who, if you had a very even split, per se, like 50-50 on some vote and, like, neither side is budging, you'd wind up with two instances of the universe. Right, because you'd be running two different versions. Who's to say what's official? Like, because so half the server hosters can only be connected to by half the clients, the same half that are running the same version of the software they are, but they can't connect across to the other side, who has decided to implement some change, and 50% of the users is good enough. Like, it never reaches the critical mass that everyone says, okay, we have to change over.
Well, maybe you set a higher threshold for changeover or something.
Where do you set this threshold? Like, it's an open source thing. Anyone can put out a copy of the software. What's from stopping me from just putting out and then half the users saying, okay, we'll use it. The software is going to run. It's not going to check to make sure that it's in majority before it runs, because then you could never get it started. I mean, I'm not even saying it's a problem if it splits, right? Like,
well, I mean, theoretically, I mean, it's It's like when Microsoft tried to change the internet specifications so that other browsers couldn't
Right.
exist.
Right.
And it becomes problematic. I mean, so if half of the user base can only access half the universe, then it becomes it's a pain for them. I'm not exactly sure how you fix that. What would you suggest?
I mean, I'm not even sure it's a problem, right? Like, because right now, you could say you can only buy my product using Walmart bucks at Walmart, right? Like, they could put out that change, so to speak, and unless all the people decide to adopt Walmart bucks as the new official currency, then it just doesn't really go anywhere. So I could put out a change that no one's going to take hold of. I think you just might run into a change that is very polarizing. But eventually, like, World of Warcraft is gonna, Blizzard's gonna say we're gonna take this change, or they're not, and you're still gonna have like these big players that are distributing these things that run on top of the end game.
Yeah,
and they're gonna decide what they want.
And if you have changes, then you run into that same natural monopoly problem.
Oh, as long as like two giant companies were on different sides, then you might have a problem.
Well, I mean, that's part of the idea, though, is that you set up the system such that big companies, or not big companies, but enormous, that there aren't enormous power shares.
So I guess the question is, so you're trying to limit the number of players to World of Warcraft, right? Like now only. Well, I mean, that's kind of the design, right? You don't want 1 million people playing World of Warcraft, just so you don't want millions and millions of people on Twitter, right?
No, not necessarily. It's just that I don't want it. If everybody loves playing World of Warcraft, then I think that's fine. Now, granted, I think the proposal that I've put forward kind of prohibits. It kind of sets a critical mass on a particular virtual world. My concern is not trying to force people into a small box. It's simply a matter of trying to prevent situations where there are majority shareholders in the system.
Yeah, but it's to me it sounds like you've done that by limiting the number of people that can be on any one world.
Not
right?
limiting the number of people, but just limiting the benefits. Setting up, encoding the system so that there are diminishing returns for everybody. For Facebook, there are diminishing returns for Facebook trying to recruit above a reasonable amount of users.
If by implementing it across the whole system, you are going to have diminishing returns. So, say you find a new game and you really like it, and you share it with all your friends, but now all of a sudden the benefits of playing that game, the amount of currency you get goes down, and now because now more people are playing it, and now the game is going to have to like dynamically tune. So if you liked just that game, and as long as the game adapted to the amount of currency that was being put out, so like when you're on the Blizzard server and playing World of Warcraft and you get like 27 gold, like when you're playing alone versus when there's 1 million people and now you only get like 3 gold for beating that same monster. Now the same you should now be able to buy the same thing with that 3 gold that you were able to buy with your 27 gold. It's just the export is going to go away.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's up to the particular game designer for that particular universe, but as to how they handle kind of the deflation and inflation of their own resources. But I mean, this is really just kind of a thought experiment. This is why I need grant money, Alex, because there are problems.
You need to be paid to think about this more.
Exactly.